Good morning, and many thanks for inviting me here to share with you our experiences and our hopes in buying St Munns Church in Cowal. When we finally heard the church was ours, it was quite overwhelming. The process had taken so long, it was quite amazing the day had finally arrived. Literally a dream come true, a dream formed many years ago. In this overview of the church, you can see the Victorian graveyard surrounding the church, and up on the right is basically a hillside. To the left, the Holy Loch, and a very linear community. A close-up of the site. You can see to the left the collegiate tower, a reminder that once Kilmun was an important place. We had a bishop. We could vote in Parliament, and our records are mentioned and kept in Paisley Abbey. The church is set in Argyll on the Cowal Peninsula near to Dunoon. It's on the banks of the Holy Loch, just across the Firth of Clyde from Glasgow. Now it's a quiet area of Scotland, but in Victorian era it was a very important holiday destination, a place for the rich merchants of Glasgow to visit and to build their holiday homes. Why is the site important to us? Well, for me, probably because it's just so beautiful, but different people love it for different reasons. It has an amazing history. We have on the site the Argyll Mausoleum, the burial site for the chiefs of the Clan Campbell. We have, as you saw in previous slides, the collegiate tower. We have an amazing Victorian graveyard. We have an almost unique water organ, and we have some fantastic stained glass windows. We basically have the history of Scotland from 3000 BC, a site of religious worship continually from 645 until 2018. A very brief history of the site. Folk have lived on the banks of the Holy Loch since 3000 BC. The first records we have of people living in Kilmun is when Munn, a priest from Ireland, left Ireland to join Columba on Iona. He missed Iona and ended up at Kilmun and formed a small religious settlement of 12 monks, we're told. They had dispensation and could marry and formed a religious community. Life continued for several hundred years. They had a small church. Then Scotland became united, and the Campbells became the clan that was in charge, if you like, of Argyll. The Campbells had their seat in Inverary. They needed somewhere where they could bury their chiefs, and they chose Kilmun. So Kilmun Church became a collegiate church, much like Roslin. The monks no longer had to work so hard. They had funding in order to pray for the Campbells, and they had funding to purchase and build accommodation. So the tower to the left is the collegiate tower. It's where the monks lived, and the top floor would have been where the bishop lived. The bishop could go to Parliament, he could raise taxes, he was an important guy, and the site is mentioned in the records held in Paisley Abbey. In 1642, the Lammonts, the local clan, finally had enough of having a new landlord. They attacked the Campbells. The Campbells retreated to the church, and the church was ransacked and set fire to. That was the end of the second church, the collegiate church on this site. Following the ransacking and burning of the church and the death of the 19 Campbells within the building, a small church continued for the local congregation and monks. And then in the Victorian era, Glaswegians came doon the water to Dunoon and to Cowal for their holidays. They built grand mansions, and the rich Glasgow merchants needed a grand parish church. They got together and built the church that we now see on this slide. This view from the rear of the church shows to the left the Argyll Mausoleum. It has a large cast iron roof which was designed by the Marquis of Lorne, the 9th Duke of Argyll and husband of Princess Louise, the daughter of Queen Victoria. The domed roof of the beautiful mausoleum, the reason I got involved. I opened the doors to the mausoleum, looked up and just thought, wow, we have to save this building. And 2 of our wonderful stained glass windows, we have 9 in total, mostly designed by the famous designer of stained glass, Stephen Adam. And finally, our water organ. To the left, the conventional pipes of an organ. To the right, the hydraulic pump, which compresses the air in 4 bellows, which drives the organ. The times change. In 2005, the foundations were set for where we are today. Where did the idea to own the church first begin to grow? With the founding of Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park, funding became available for communities to establish community development trusts, and Benmore and Kilmun Community Development Trust was created. An ongoing and increasingly severe problem of damp in the church was coming to a head. The church was in danger of falling into disrepair. The problem, massive water ingress from the Argyll Mausoleum adjacent to the church. But neither Argyll and Bute Council nor Argyll Estates, the Duke of Argyll, had the funding to undertake the repairs. There were threats of legal action. The congregation and the church in Edinburgh were becoming increasingly impatient. Myself and a fellow director of the Development Trust, obviously deemed gullible and easy to influence, were shown into the mausoleum and into the church, and quite simply fell in love with the buildings and vowed to ensure they would be repaired and restored. We formed a new company with charitable status to enable us to bid for grants, and Argyll Mausoleum Limited was born. There followed almost 10 years of passionate and time-consuming involvement for a small group of local community, helped by a fantastic community development officer from the National Park and a wonderful architect. I think Mike, my husband, would say it became an obsession. Some statistics. For the volunteers involved in the restoration, I reckon well over 10,000 hours, over £1 million raised, over 1,000 people involved, some 38 events, 14 interviews with the media, 7 public meetings, 15 grant applications, and help from 9 amazing experts and advisors. On the downside, almost several divorces, far too little wine, a vast amount of coffee, but 7 new friends, quite a lot of tears, both of relief and of frustration. Initially, we raised over £1 million, enough to repair and restore both the mausoleum and the parts of the church that were damp, and to create the interpretation and visitor centre. The charity Historic Kilmun was born, the working name of Argyll Mausoleum Limited. It was an uneasy partnership with the Cowal Church, to whom we were committed to pay 50% of our income in rent, or £3,000. Our funding came from grants. We did not hold coffee mornings or sponsored runs. Our main funders were LEADER, European money, Heritage Lottery Fund, what was Historic Scotland, the Landfill Fund, Argyll and Bute Council, the National Park. Each funder had their own specific demands and often only funded a specific part of the total project. This resulted in some amazingly complex cash flow projections and grant claims, almost all paid retrospectively, meaning the setting up of a contingency for bridging loans, although we actually never had to use these. In 2010, our artefact restorer went into liquidation, but in 2012 we opened to the public, but visitor numbers were not high. We realised that to be sustainable, we had to reach more sections of our community. We fundraised to employ a community development coordinator, funding coming from the Robertson Trust, with match funding from Argyll Bute Council and 2 generous donations from supporters. Dan Romani was appointed. He coordinated the projects such as art therapy for those with mental health problems, oral history linking the young from the local school with the elderly, and training for those wishing to return to work, courses in subjects related to our project: Blue Badge Guide, Basic Finance, Food Hygiene, Public Speaking. By running the activities, we became increasingly aware of the importance of the church building. We had to use village halls for many of the sessions. We had limited access to the church itself. And in parallel, other initiatives were being created. Gilbert Marcus was working with the local minister and the chair of Historic Kilmun to create Faith in Cowal, a pilgrimage trail around the ancient religious sites in Cowal. We were working to create a heritage trail around the heritage sites of East Cowal. There was a definite need for a hub for all these blossoming projects. The local Community Development Trust realised the need to restore the mausoleum and repair the church, formed a separate organisation, Argyll Mausoleum Limited, with a working name of Historic Kilmun. But despite restoring the mausoleum and renovating the church, we were not sufficiently embedded in the community to be sustainable. We started community projects, but we didn't have the space to run them. We were using village halls. Simultaneously, Faith in Cowal and the Echo Trail were blossoming projects. They needed a hub. We formed a stakeholder working group to create a business plan to put to the church to purchase it. We found the funding and we agreed a price. So for about 6 years, we operated a visitor centre within the local church, paying rent to the local church and opening the visitor centre, the mausoleum and the church to the public for 7 months of the year. In parallel with our need for a hub for our community activities and to make the whole project sustainable, the community was changing. We live in such a beautiful place, we tend to stay. The population ages, the congregation of the church was dwindling, and difficult decisions had to be made. For us, it was critical that the church was not sold to a private individual and did not lie empty. For 4 years, we've been working with members of the congregation and with the officers from the Church of Scotland in Edinburgh to try to safeguard the future of the building, to ensure this building did not once again risk falling into disrepair. We established a community right to buy, should the building be put on the market. We looked at many sources of funding. We had previously used Historic Environment Scotland, and we also looked at the Scottish Business Culture Fund and business sponsorship. Eventually, the congregation of the Shore Kirk, a parish with, as I say, 3 churches, but a population of only 800, made the decision to dispose of both the churches in Ardentiny and in Kilmun. I really do appreciate how difficult that must have been. Almost 3 years ago, the church ceased to be used for services for the first time in almost 1400 years. If we wanted to take over the church, we had to be able to prove we would be responsible owners. We formed partnerships with stakeholders. We created a working group to build a business plan to put to 121 George Street. There had been a logjam. For 3 years, we'd been negotiating to either buy or lease the building, but with little progress. But St Munns needed maintenance, and the local congregation were responsible for funding that maintenance for a building that they were no longer using. The local clerk and the Argyll moderator started pushing for the building to be sold and supporting our offer to buy. We submitted our business plan, proposing that the building would continue to be available for use by the church and demonstrating that our plan was sustainable. The building was valued, a low figure, but more than we wanted to pay. The price was slightly complicated in that the local congregation would benefit from the funds raised. we would be even more unpopular if we offered too low a price. We compromised at £10,000. Our solicitor was a friend and acted for nothing. The building became ours in June 2021. The list on this slide is that of the potential funders we had approached. Our aim has always been to be economically sustainable for the day-to-day operation of the building, but for projects, for capital expenditure, for the foreseeable future, we anticipate the need of grant funding. We had thought we would need grant funding to buy the church. In the end, we negotiated so low a price, and with free conveyancing, were able to buy the church using our reserves. Our aim in the end is to be economically sustainable. We have operated for the past 10 years only using grant aid for specific projects. Our main income has been earned or donations. We earn income roughly in equal amounts from coach tours, visitors, coffee, gifts, music, form of concerts and recitals, guided tours, and the sale of donated books. Ownership gives us the opportunity to once again bring the building into the heart of the community, to ensure that the buildings are seen and used by as many folk as possible, by those with a faith and those with none, by those enthralled by its amazing history, by the stunning stained glass, and by the peaceful and inspiring atmosphere. Since the 7th century, the site has been used for worship by monks, by Catholics, by Protestants. People have adapted, and now once again we have the chance to yet again adapt, to make the most of the opportunity presented to us to bring more people into this inspirational site. On the slide are options in our business plan. We've found that basically we have to be many things. The site cannot just be used for one or two purposes. To be economically viable, we have to be many things to many people, and hopefully that is possible. For this multifaceted future, we need partners, we need stakeholders. One of the major partners is education. Partners from education, from the local schools, from the primary schools, seen here doing grave rubbings, from the local secondary schools, history department, and from undergraduates and postgraduates from universities. We will need friends, we will need the expertise, and most of all, we'll need the patience and support of both God and good fortune, depending on your belief. We want to complement, not compete with existing organisations and community buildings. We need to fill a gap and also create a new demand. As you saw, our business plan lists many possibilities of bringing the building into wider use. The use of the building for music is an obvious one. We already have organ recitals and some choral events, but maybe expanding that, folk music, rock music, even a few drummers playing in the mausoleum. The acoustics are amazing. A place where you can be married, a celebrant of your choice, a special place for your funeral, a place for retreat and meditation in partnership with Faith in Cowal, a place for worship, a place to remember, a series of historical lectures, author events, a Christmas fair. We have a partnership with the Job Centre and are offering training with the Heritage Horizon scheme. Doors Open Day in September saw us once again open our doors to visitors from all over Scotland. And yet more music. Inevitably a cafe, for you surely cannot have too many cafes in an area, and a gift shop. At the moment, as you can see, these are squashed into a small back room, but in the future, hopefully in an airy, beautiful space within the main church. Yes, finally buying the church, owning the church, it does feel wonderful. It feels very exciting, but to make the whole project sustainable is a big challenge, and we're very well aware of that. Basically, the challenge falls into two sections, people and money, with the third one getting planning permission. The whole site is Grade A listed. The surrounding graveyard is Grade A listed. We're not even allowed to dig 2 inches into the surrounding soil without an archaeologist present. So, yep, that will be a challenge. Secret Cowal, a beautiful, quiet backwater of Scotland to live in, but we need to attract visitors. And then, as I've said, we need finance and we need people. We need to keep slowly growing our pool of volunteers. We need to engage with our stakeholders and engage with the local church community and the community at large without falling out with each other. What support do we need? We need joined up thinking. We need partners, we need friends. We need to be working together with other initiatives in the area to increase visitor numbers, to increase the local community's involvement. And initially, we need some capital funding. But yes, we do believe this is possible. We believe that with the continual support of our partners, we will manage to make the site, the project, sustainable for the future. Thank you very much.